something like that. Or you can use an egg crate when you get home, something like that. Okay? Just track all those screws. You're going to move all this stuff out of the way. Be careful with the head location. It flies at a certain height, so we're not going to bend it. This was all the backup we did from yesterday, how your voice coil, everything moves in the middle. I actually have an animation for all of this. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so be careful too, like we've already gone over this, platters that are made with glass and ceramic, aluminum, blah, blah, blah. This is what happens when they get scratched. You can see through them. This is actually 2 discs. So one scratched, you can see the damage right here where the head assembly got damaged. Then it scratched both platters on both sides because the dust that came off. And if you can't tell, this is a Hitachi. So that's what happens when a Hitachi goes bad. And can you recover that? No, probably not. I mean, some people go, can't you get this silver part? If you could get a drive to initialize, what are the chances are you're going to get it to initialize? Or that as soon as you put a set of heads on this, that you don't just tear up those sets of heads. It's pretty slim that you're not going to do that. Plus, that was your data. I don't know if you know that, but this dust, see this dust? That dust, that was your data. Right? That, if you get a glass platter and you get it balanced wrong when you screw it back together, this is what will happen. This was a picture of a student's drive that a student did, and they didn't get it right, and they still screwed it in. Okay? We're not gonna talk. So when you get your head misaligned and you don't get it right, and you leave it sitting there all night long, and you've left while the drive is on, it skips over the platter, and your head is making these little indentations. This is just a shift in color from a fluorescent light, so you can see. These are checkerboards. They're like little checkerboards. Just banging the disc to death, eating away, and you'll get this ghostly color white as it eats away at the lubrication in the plastic level. Okay? These are all the ways to go wrong. That is created by when you don't take the end of the ones that are parked in a ramp, when you don't take those out and you do something that bends that end piece, it digs into the platter and it makes S's all over. So you'll have snakes on a plane. See how many people get that joke. All right. So they'll be all over. Anyway, I've got pictures of those where there's snakes on a plane. Anyway. All right. This one was so bad, this one scratched so bad that you could actually see the imprint of the head assembly and the stuff in the lid. You can actually see like the head assembly. That dust is data. That is the data. Was the data. No, it's still the data. It's still the data. Right, talking about a jigsaw puzzle. And then this is what the filter looks like. It's supposed to be that white, but it's not that white. This is actually the data in the filter. If you pull a filter out of the edge of a drive when you open it, and you have a doubt about how much damage is in between the platters, if you think it's scratched and there's some damage in there and you want to know how much, look at the filter. If it looks like that, the whole disc is probably scratched inside. The top and the bottom may be fine, but that's what it's going to look like inside.
You still try to recover data from that?
It's up to the client. I will give them the option. I'll do the work, and I only charge them my diagnostics fee. I won't charge them anything else except for getting the parts. So if I'm successful, then I win. If I'm not successful, then I have a pretty good loss. Does that make sense? But I'll tell them how bad it is. I'm pretty straightforward honest with clients. I'm like, this is what I see. This is what I think it is. I think you have cancer. It's going to die. Like I tell them the truth. And I'll say, look, you've got a 10% chance that this is going to work. And so it might cost you, $200 to get a donor drive. It's up to you. I'll do the work. You're paying me $50.
That is already on the filter. There's nothing you can do.
Right, but I might still be able to get the top and the bottom platter or something like that. I might not get the ones in between. And then you can peel back on the Western Digital, see how much damage there is inside. This one's actually all eaten up, so you already know before you even take the lid off. This is what it looked like inside when I finally got in there. There is a ring around the center. This is not damage. This is a parking location. What they do in the parking locations, they know that if you take a head and you put it on a platter, 2 non-porous surfaces are going to stick together. So what they do is they cut little dimples in it so that they're little mountains. So when your head is sitting on it, it's sitting at the point of a peak of a mountain. And then they fill it with lubrication. And that's why when it's parked in the center, it spins really easy. when you get to the outside edge and it's sitting on top of a platter, it was never meant to sit there, it was meant to float. So that's what that is right there, is lubrication. That's not damage. But this is damage. Okay? All right, we're breaking it apart. We're basically going to rip everything out of it. My point is, if it has a screw and it comes out of the drive, you're taking it apart. Okay? So all magnets, everything comes out. You set them out in a row on the table. And then once you have it all done, you call me, and then I verify, and then you can put it all back together, and we can make sure it's working again. Okay? All right. So I use tape and stuff to hold things out of the way all the time. Now let's talk about head assemblies. Blah, blah, blah. It's all the words to back up what I said. This is an old Mac Store drive. This is one of those where I told you that said there's a location right here. You see that chipset right there? And over here there isn't one? This is the original board. This is the patch board. Right. That's a patch. So
But those patches come from the manufacturer. You don't do them with this.
Right.
It's a new model.
That's correct. It's patched from the manufacturer. Usually this one will be released earlier. Later on this one's released. But just because two drives look the same, if you don't look at the board, if you had a patch and then you didn't repair it with one with a patch, so in other words, if I'm going to swap boards, I better take that chip with me. Does that make sense? You don't want to apply one that had the patch or didn't have the patch to another drive, or you'll get some other bug that will kick in. Something else will happen. Okay? All right, so we talked about all these things. All right, so here's the kind of the step-by-step. Now, the first thing you usually always are taking off is the electronics. So now, I promise one of you will forget. So the first drive I'll hand you, you're going to write 2 gigs of data to. And then you're going to disassemble it. You're going to take the board off, then you're going to open the case, you're going to disassemble the drive. Then I'm going to give you a second drive. And you're going to forget to write data to it. Don't forget. Because I promise you the one you forgot is the one that you will be able to recover. And the recovery of zeros is not very exciting. I promise. There's a lot of reasons why I'm telling you to format it. NTFS, we're going to format it NTFS no matter what size the drive is, because some drives might be a 20 gig drive. You're going to format it NTFS, but it will say FAT is what I want you to record, what it wants to be formatted as. But NTFS is what we're doing. Then we're going to copy 2 gigs of data to it. Eventually we're going to get to a spot where I can show you how to do a logical recovery without having to go to Windows or do anything else to do it. Okay? So that's the next thing. Now, the electronics come off because when you put it in your bench or you're working on it, you need access to the actuator arm from underneath if there's a screw in it. So then step by step, on what page is this on? Everybody, we're on page 410. So this is kind of where the graphical version, I have a graphical version and a text version of the closest I can get to step by step. And then after that, it's just going to be by drive and things like that. So you're going to take off the outside 6 or so screws. There usually is one underneath a label. I usually just puncture it with my tweezers and then go around in a circle and take it out. Sometimes on like IBM drives, there will be 3 screws, so there'll be others that'll be in here. And every once in a while, you have one through the spindle assembly. Okay?
Even on the old Western Littles, the platter, that one in the middle is on for the head.
Yeah, so you can always tell where the platter is by this circular component here.
Remember you said the head was held in by that one?
Yes, oh yes, oh yeah, when this comes out, yeah, this is the head. Yep, but you have to do it. What are you going to do?
And you can't measure it, you can't measure it before.
Nope. There's nothing to measure beforehand because you don't have access to where the head is, and it's going to be free floating underneath the head assembly. So, you know, the closest idea anyone's ever had to a way to make this work is to have a way to chop the metal so that you could leave that screw in place with a pair. But how are you going to do that without damaging the platter? Right. I haven't come up with one. No one I know on earth has come up with one. There's a couple of people who sell like a $1,200 tool, and you know it sticks in the hole, and you can turn little dials, and it makes little minor adjustments. But I've never seen a solution that it actually works. You still have to sit here and make adjustments. So why do it? Why do any expense if you're just going to use a screwdriver? So anyway, so at that point, that's the dimple that's coming through. You can remove the board, get that out of the way. Then remove the foam, strip it down. Let's forget about the motor for the moment. That's me dealing with motor. Then we're into the disassembly. Now, here's the other thing. You're starting with a known good drive. You're going to write data on it. You're going to disassemble it. You're going to rebuild it. The one thing you don't have that happens in the real world is parts. Because you're rebuilding the same drive. It's identical no matter what happens in the rest of the world, but you can't ever get back to a known good condition if you don't start with known parts. In the real world, if you have two drives and you disassemble them side by side, I promise minutes later, you go to lunch, come back, you cannot remember which board went with what, which piece. You will doubt yourself every time. I promise. There's no doubt about it. You will doubt where they go. So I labeled them. I get a permanent marker, which is in your bag, and I write an O on the original board and a D on the donor drive. Or, I mark the parts so I know which part comes from what. So I just get into a habit of doing that. The other thing that's very helpful, if you get into an order, if you get into using it in a certain order, I always put my bad drive on the right on the bench. I always put the donor drive on the left on the bench. So I have an order that always works. All parts go to the right that are from the original. All parts go to the left from the donor. That way when I'm moving the parts over, I know which pieces I'm taking. Because there's nothing worse than taking the donor drive's platters and putting those in your drive and rebuilding it and it working. Because then you don't have any data for your client. You have to do the opposite. You understand? Okay. Just making a point. Label everything. And then remember, in your own lab, you need the label. I always Xerox it before I start. Now that's not something easy to do here, but you can take a picture. But you would be searching for your donor drive by parts. Now, once you get to Thursday, it may be possible that some of the drives that you've worked on or that you've already rebuilt, that you can come up here, find a drive that matches it, and then take it apart and swap parts. People do that in the class all the time. So once you've gotten good enough to do it, and you can rebuild that drive 100 times, then you can come and do that. Okay? So we're going to format the hard drive. You're going to plug in your USB connector to the drive. You're going to plug it into the system. You're going to go into Device Manager like we already showed earlier today. We're going to format it in TFS. Then there is a folder on the drive. Now, before we get too much further down here, I need to show you how to build your tools. So you're going to format the drive. You're going to put 2 gigs on it. Then you're going to start removing all these screws. Then you're going to get into the drive. So this is the graphical part. You're going to get into the drive. Now, here's my step as I start to look at this. So here's a Western Digital drive. I've already removed the bottom and the top. I get into here. The very first thing I know is over here, I've got a ribbon cable connected to this board. I'm going to pop these 2 screws out. Don't leave them sitting there like some people do in electronics. Just leave them in the board and back it out, because they'll fall onto the platter and ruin your platter. Take these out, put them on the paper, label them, and then this you're just going to swing out. You can't remove it because you got a ribbon cable that's connected to your actuator arm. So you don't want to do anything that causes any stress. The next thing I want to do is I want to get the magnet, the top of the magnet for the voice coil off. So in this case, I've backed off these 2 screws. I swing this piece out because it will be in the way. When I bring this head out here, if I was aligning it here, that would be in the way. So I'm taking that piece out and I'm moving it to the side. Now, and ignore that I did it in this order from this standpoint, because I would normally pull this magnet off first. Because if I take the magnet off now, while I move the head to the side, I have a chance that, since this is a Western Digital drive, which would not be true on any other drive, that a Western Digital drive, the head moves back and forth. It might do damage to the platter because there is no screw there. You can put a screw there. You can take the screw from the lid and now screw it into there just to keep it from wobbling. Okay? Now, on this magnet, you'll notice there's a top screw here, and then these 2 are bottom screws. So do not take off these bottom screws, because the bottom magnet, when you pull on the top magnet, will drag it into the voice coil, and you will now damage your head assembly. If that happens, ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, keep on going. Okay? So we're going to take this one off. Then we remove this assembly. Okay? Now, once you're inside this drive, I want to point out this piece right here. This is the locking mechanism for this drive. They're all different in every drive. So in this drive, it's a magnet, and this piece of metal that's in the circle is at the end of the actuator arm, and it's being held there. Okay? There's a gap right here. That's the only area with which you can take out this piece. Now this piece kind of bend sideways and you can move it out, but you want to move just enough. I'm going to move just enough to break free from that magnet right there, so it's in that gap. Then I remove this screw. then I can remove this piece. So pay attention to where you need to take a piece out. Does this make sense to people? They have an order, and you'll start getting used to it when you see it. You'll mess up a couple times, pretend it didn't happen, keep on going. Okay? All right. And then if I need an extra set of hands, here's the neat thing. That is not touching the platter. So the platter is usually submerged except on Samsung drives. Samsung drives are the only drive, pretty much, that has this upper case. And then when you take this case off, the platters are exposed. Everybody else has platters that are submerged, okay? So for the most part, you can do something like that, and it'll hold the actuator arm in place if you don't have enough hands, okay? All right, we're going to make out of trash. We're going to make our own head combs. So we're basically going to cut a piece, trying to make something. Now, I make them now mostly like this. So they're one solid piece folded in the middle. And I'm going to try to make a set of head combs that will actually fit in between heads. And I make the size depending on how big the heads are. Because if you have little tiny heads, you want little tiny thin ones. Inside your kit, there is two types of material. So besides the thicker Sudafed container one, there's also a gum wrapper. You should have a gum wrapper in your bag. Yeah, see this one right here? So inside your bag is a gum wrapper. This one. And see how thin this material is? This is a very thin material that I'm using from like Orbit's gum or something like that. It's a very thin material. And I can make, for 2.5-inch drives, I can make a head assembly that's thinner than the one that comes from the Sudafed container, which is a thicker material. That amount of space makes a huge difference, okay? So I'm looking for things that are thinner so that I can make that happen. Everybody understand? So save that, unless you need it, save that for Friday so that you'll be able to make some from your kit, for your 2.5-inch. Yep. Yeah, you can take it off. Okay. So, now if you're looking at the pictures in order to make this, I do kind of have like a quick step-by-step. And remember, at the first day, remember on the, it seems like so long ago, doesn't it? At the beginning of the first page, I had some templates for the sizes that I make. But you'll get used to it pretty quick. So this is what we're going to make, okay? Now, I'm going to show you, and if everybody will gather around, if you guys will come up here, I'm going to try to stand in front of the camera so the camera will pick it up while I'm doing it. But I'm going to try to show you how I would make a set of these. Now, it really depends on which type of drive so there's two types of tools that you're looking to make, and one of them I do not really have a picture in the book. So here's the thing. If you have a drive like this right here, and it has one head on the bottom, if I make the duckbill shape, there's nothing for the other side to push against. Is that clear to everybody? So once I've cleared the edge of the drive, I don't really need to protect it from each other. I don't need them, because I'm really trying to keep them from sticking together. But once I've cleared the edge of the drive like it is right now, I only have to worry about the one head. So there's no reason for me to have a duckbill that's sitting in there all the time. Does that make sense? So in that particular instance, what I normally do is I look at it from a perspective of a stomper, is basically the way I look at it. I'll take a strip. I'll just cut a straight strip. I try to curve the ends a little bit so it makes it a little bit less sharp. So I'll try to make just like a curved end. Then I will fold it three times, so it's like a Z. Everybody understand what I mean? So I'm making it a Z. Okay? That way I can lift or push down. So if I have no ramp in here, I've put this head up underneath here, I want to get that head out safely. I don't want it scraping the edge of the platter. If I moved it out, it will scrape the edge of the platter. I treat this head with the most respect possible. The better you are and the nicer you are to your heads, the more it's going to work. So I make a Z-shaped tool. I would start back here in the back, I would go underneath this platter right here. So it's underneath, and it's on the piece of metal that the head assembly is on, but it's in between that and the platter. Now when I slide down here, I'm going to get a spot where there's like a little weld right here. If you just slowly kind of jiggle past it, you'll get past it, and you'll see I'm sitting about where the head is. So you can see from where the head is itself, I'm stopping before the head, before the black part of the head, and I'm just shy of that, so I'm pushing on the metal. So this is enough to keep that head from rubbing against the metal. You see what I mean? So I'm now clear of the piece where the head where it can touch that metal. And then I can actually swing that out and then let it go. And then I don't need, now I would not have this ramp here. It would be clear. I would have already taken the ramp out. Does that make sense to everybody? So my whole point is just to make sure that the head gets out here safely and that it does not scrape against the platter. And don't let it go back under there either, because once you get it out here and you've already cleared all this other stuff, the head likes to swing back under it. So I use a piece of tape across here to hold it, keep it safe while I still work on it or take a breath or whatever else happens, okay? Now, if the head was in the opposite direction, the head was on top of this platter, I do exactly the same thing. I would be starting, so it's up here. Let's pretend that the head's right here. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to push against the top piece, and you can see it in there. So I'm actually now sitting on top of the platter. I would be sliding down here. I would pause right before the end of the head. Then that way I can kind of lift it out and move it out. Now do not bend the head. You're not putting any additional pressure on it. You're just getting just enough to get it clear. Okay? If you protect that head at all costs, that will save you money and time, and you will be one of the best guys doing this job. Okay? So that's all I'm trying to do with this tool.
Now, before you move it, you take the ramp off always, right?
Yes, this ramp, once I put this, like if I had spun this platter, moved the head up to there, then I would have stopped. The head would be parked on the platter. I would go ahead and remove the ramp, and then my whole job would be to get all this, and I would probably move some of this stuff ahead of time so that I'm free and clear so that it'll move out, right? So you kind of have to use your judgment about what pieces are in your way. And then I would keep this piece to keep it safe. And then you're just trying to do everything you can to keep that head from scraping the edge of the platter as you pull off, because it'll scrape the head right off. It'll do damage to it, it'll scrape it, and you can't tell what's going on. Okay? So that's the first part. Now, these work in combination. What if I have 3 heads? If I have 3 heads, then I must have 2 facing each other and 1 not facing either way. I follow the wire. I look for the wire to see where the head is. Is the head on the top? Is it on the bottom? If it's on the bottom, then I'm going to put my duck bill where it needs to be first, and then the place that I only have 1 head, I'm going to use this in conjunction with it, and so the other piece would be fitting in between there. It would be inside, behind this one. So this is the last one that I'd put in. And then that way when I come down here and clear it, I'd be moving them both at the same time. Everybody understand what I mean?
I don't understand that.
So if I had 3 heads and I had another set of heads on top of here, now I have 2 heads that would oppose each other. And so we're going to build another tool to fit in between those 2. So and then I have 1 single head. Deal with the single head last.
Okay.
Do the duck bill and separate the 2 heads first. Then take the Z shape and put it in the one that you need, and then you can move the whole set as one. Okay? So you'll have it happen. We'll do it in the class. There's no doubt you're going to run into one. We'll do it, even if I have to sit down and show you how to do it. But I'm just trying to make sure everybody understands. So now, if I had 2 heads that are opposing each other, I want to make a duck bill. Okay? Everybody good with this? Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a piece. Now, I'm used to just about how long I need. I usually do it a little bit longer than I think I need. So if 2 heads were opposing each other and they were like this, they don't have to be super long. This head's not very long, and it's going to be close to the edge of the platter. So I'm only going to need about that much space, and I'll have good control. Okay? The shorter it is, the better control it is. The longer it is, I mean, I could make one long enough to go the whole length of the platter, but I'm not going to have any control. Okay? That's kind of a bad plan. I want to make it as short as I need it to be. So I'm going to take the edge of one of these, and I'm going to cut down what I think I need, which would be, for this one, be right about, this is the length I would start with. Does that make sense? So about that length. So that's about 2 inches. Okay? All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is there's two sizes of foam tape, double face foam tape. In this case, on 3.5 inch drives, I use the bigger one. There is a smaller one. There is a smaller set of squares, and most of them are smaller. They're usually thinner. They're a little bit thinner. Let me make sure that there's a smaller set in here somewhere. These. They're usually a little bit thinner. Okay? So that I use on a 2.5 inch drive, the thinner ones. The thicker ones I use on a 3.5 inch drive. Okay?
That's going where?
Huh?
That's going where?
It's going to go on. Now, you'll see what's going to happen is this duckbill piece right here.
That's like your spring.
Yep. So I'm going to take this. I'm just going to cut a little sliver off. Okay? So I've just cut a little tiny sliver off. I don't need that anymore. So I just have a little piece, right? I'm going to peel one side. So I have the sticky side facing. I go just shy. So I take the middle and I go just shy of that side of the middle. Okay? So that way I've got it offset. So now I have just what would have been, instead of the middle, just slightly to one side. Okay? Then I peel off the other side. Then I close it over it. Okay? So now I have a really ugly piece of foam sticking off out of the edges. And then I have this nice piece, which is pretty even at this point. Right? Okay, now the first thing I do, you want to get rid of all the foam on the edges, even if it means you have to shave in just a tiny bit on the plastic. Get rid of that. Okay, do the same thing here. Don't do it over your hard drive. Right? So now I've shaved it off. Now the reason I go right into the edge of the plastic and I don't leave any of it off is because I'm going to move this around with my tweezers. So I have a set of tweezers right here. And most of the time what happens is I'm moving this around and I'm using these tweezers, but I don't want it to stick to the tweezers. I want to be able to hold it like this. And if there was foam on the edges, the glue would stick to the tweezers. So after you get it in place, you go to remove it, it won't let go. And you're pulling it back. So shave it down so that there's no stickiness. Okay? Everybody good? Alright. Now the next thing I would do is I separate the two like an open duckbill. I do not like square edges because when you have a weld or you're trying to get past something, square edges get in the way a lot. So I take the top one, the one that I think is going to be the shortest one, and I curve. So I just kind of bite into it a little bit and then I curve around and I make it rounded. Okay? And then I do the same thing with the longer one on the bottom without losing my length. Okay? And then I come around and I just make kind of a longer one. So I have one side that's longer than the other side. Okay? And I'll squeeze those together at the base so that the foam kind of moves down. But that's what I'm using. You'll see that's a pretty good spring. That's a pretty good distance for them to sit apart from each other. See what I mean? So now what ends up happening, if I have a drive that has two heads on it, it's exactly the same process even though I only have one here. It just won't hold it there. So what happens here is I take my tweezers, I squeeze right here. So I'll hold it flat so that it won't open up. Because when I let go, it'll open up some. Okay? So I'm going to squeeze it so it's flat. And try to get it as flat as possible. I come back here in the rear. And so I try to come in between those two wires. So you're not touching those two wires. There's one's, now I'm holding it at a angle because you'll be flat on the table. So this isn't the best angle to do. So you'll be flat on the table, so it'll be like this. And again, I'm going to have to turn it so you can see. But I'm going to take this, I'm going to come in behind the rear. Now all this will be out of the way. I come in the rear, I push down with the long one underneath, and then the short one goes above. Everybody understand what I mean? So the head would be sitting up on the platter. I'm coming in. I go here to the back. I let go. Now it's holding itself there. I'm going to take the edges and I'm going to just move it so that it's in there and it's all the way across the platter. So now I have one on one side and one on the other side of the platter. Now as I jiggle this down and I come down, now of course my hand won't be there. As I come down here, I hit that weld. Now I'm going to slowly just kind of jiggle past that weld very carefully, and then I will be on the other side of both of those heads, and they will oppose each other. And then that will hold those in place. So when I move the heads out, it'll be done. Does that make sense? So that's what you're making. So pass that around so everybody can see it. But that's what you're trying to make when you get into your drive. But now, take a look at your drive, get into it, look at it before you have to go down that path. But that's how you do it. I do have a video that's on here of how I make them. I do have some other pictures of step by step making them, starting at the bottom, going to the top, then stopping right before you get to the edge. Then you'll be able to swing your head assembly out. Does everybody understand? Okay? I'm here to help. I'm here to do it with you. So you don't have to be like afraid I just didn't tell you everything, because we'll walk through it one step at a time. Okay? But that's the whole point. Okay. Alright. Okay, now I'm going to start handing out hard drives. There is a directory. So inside your black bags you have a USB. Inside your black bags you have a USB device. So you will come here and you will format it in TFS. Okay. Then once you have it in TFS and it has a drive letter, then you'll shrink that down. You'll come back to here, and on the C drive there is a directory. It is called Data Recovery Software, not images. The images one is 40 gigs, and so you don't want that one. The Data Recovery Software is 2 gigs. So then you will have your hard drive down here, and you will drag that to that drive. You will copy 2 gigs to the drive. We're just trying to get something onto the hard drives to recover. Everybody good?
Good, yeah, good.
Do I need to repeat it?
Nope.
Format the hard drive in TFS. Then go into C drive, Data Recovery Software, 2 gigs, copy to your drive. Okay? Now I'm going to start walking around, handing out hard drives, and your job is to get it formatted and get 2 gigs of data on it. And then you can start disassembling your hard drive. And if you make a mistake, that's fine. Pretend it didn't happen. And just keep on going. Okay? A lot of this is trial by fire, and then going back over it after you're done. So I don't expect it to all be successful. And everybody's going to get completely random. I'm probably just going to I should give everybody Seagates. Everybody gets a Western Digital. That one is for Friday. This is the one we're doing Friday. But you have in your bag, you have a USB adapter. Inside here is a 2 gig is a 40 gig laptop drive. We're going to do those on Friday. Okay. So there's a box that has hard drives in them. We're doing Friday. Okay. Otherwise, the other one is the USB adapter. So we'll just do that one on Friday. Okay.
The drive's already on. The drivers.
Yes, everything's there. All you got to do is plug it in, and here you go.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
You're welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Seagates. Haha. Let's see. Okay. All right, so then follow the steps and see where we go. It's like Alice in Wonderland. Take pictures all along the way and document it. I will tell you what's really cool is later on, if you are successful and you rebuild one, documenting all the steps and even putting it in a shadow box in your house is a great idea. Like, hey kids, this is the first drive I ever rebuilt. Got it work. They're going to be like, What do you mean? Did they have spinning discs back then, Daddy?
My son was a rabbit. What I do?
Right? It'll be like, Daddy, I saw you in the going perpendicular video. Yep. Yeah, and we may be stretching it for some power in the things down there. If we can rotate through power, or if I need to, I'll get out some power strips and we'll add some power strips in. So this works.
There's a connector. Look at that. There we go.
I know, you got all your adapters right there.
Look at that, Scott.
Yep, and then you have to put your SATA power adapter on. Let's see, if you went to Micro Center and bought that box, you would have to read the instructions.